think about money as a resource. Like it's a means to an end and not the end, So it can be used in a way that brings me the happiness that I need, but it's not my source of happiness at the same time. You can make do with what you have, and if you don't have, then you just genuinely don't have, and you won't go to pick up that thing or to spend on that particular item or whatever it is. Categorizing and prioritizing what my money is for is very important to me.
Welcome back to Financially Incorrect by FX Pesa. FX Pesa are the lovely people who allow us to have this podcast. Remember, if you'd like to learn about trading, you can do so at any of their physical locations in Eldoret, Kitengela, Nakuru, Thika, and Kampala. And if you'd like to have online classes, you can check out all of the links in the description box. If you'd like to trade, whether it's a demo account to sort of practice or whether you'd actually like to live trade again, please check out all the links in the description box. All of these things are offered and brought to you by FX Pesa. It's been a while since we recorded, so I'm sort of trying to get back into the groove. But let me read a couple of comments from like our most recent, I don't know if I'd call it most recent episodes, but the episodes that went out. I'll start with Osumo Brad's episode. First of all, we saw all the people on Twitter who were talking about it, and I there are a few people who were like me and were talking about how like he goes to the gym, and glad to see that other people saw that too. Then some people, congratulations on your 1-year podcast anniversary. Thank you. Bumping onto this episode exactly a week after visiting Big Fish Roasters was my heart. Big up Osumo. This is one of the best episodes so far. The best episode I have ever watched. Got a different view to so much from self-discipline and self-awareness. Much love. Someone else says, watching this channel has been a turning point. I enjoyed this episode. Big Fish to the world. Best episode so far. We need Nas Judy on the show. Very informative podcast. Learned a lot. Then someone also said, it would have been nice to point out that his father is a former MP, not throwing shade on him, but having that good backup financially is very nice. Yes, we actually did talk about it, and he did say it a bit later, that his father was an MP. Anyway, I guess it was a story. Thanks for the feedback. Remember, subscribe, follow the page, and let's keep growing the Financially Incorrect community. We'll also have some really cool merch that's dropping soon. As soon as I get the samples, I'll put them up they'll be up on the socials and you guys can see. I'm pretty sure that people will be able to purchase them if they want. So on today's episode, we have Rukhsar Munir, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a social entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, I guess from the research that I've done or I've been given as well, big in the activism space. And you're just about to launch your own podcast as well, coming soon.
Yes, it's a work in progress, and I'm excited about it. It's called the Pan-African Podcaster. And basically the idea is to take the discussions around politics, democracy, and governance, legal theory, and rule of law outside of just Kenya and approach it from the African continent's perspective. So, yes, that is something I'm really big on. I enjoy social activism. I enjoy civic education. And I have my own social media platform. It's called Daily Event. You guys can check it out. And it's been gaining traction online for the last 3 years. So I've been using the platform to talk about current events, day-to-day issues, and just basically try and raise some awareness and create information symmetry. So that's my aim and goal with that.
Okay. Maybe I'll start with a question on your legal side. When did you sign the role of advocate? How long have you been an advocate?
7th of May 2021. I've been an advocate of the High Court for my 4th year running now. So 4 years.
Okay. Do you feel like, you know how advocates say, my learned friend, and are very offended by non-advocates using that term? Do you feel like you are now in that category? And why? If you do subscribe to that, why is the case?
I rarely ever use the phrase learned friend.
Yeah.
Only because I think it's just dripping with sarcasm. Like, that's just my opinion. I rarely ever use it. But do I feel like I'm part of an elite club generally, just being a member of the role of advocates in this country? 100%.
Yeah.
I've worked 8 years and it's about time someone recognized the effort that I put into getting there. So definitely.
I mean, but doctors and engineers do the same, and other professions. But I don't know that any of them make a bigger deal of, this club as lawyers do.
No, I don't think they should. I think it's elitist for real, right? You belong to the same club, so you should really understand.
Yeah, but I don't feel, I don't associate with it. That's why I'm asking. Yes, I am an advocate, but I don't,
you don't think of it the same way?
No, I'm like, is it really a big deal?
I think you have to take pride in it. Like, you need to take pride in the fact that you were given the privilege of addressing people in that position of authority. And not only are you given the privilege, but your word is taken as it has value, like it's substantiated because of the fact that you have this credential. So I think that's one way to think about it. Like I said, the phrase itself, learned friend, to me, that's dripping with sarcasm. So I would rarely ever use it. In fact, when someone uses it, like in a classroom or something, I'm just like, why? Just like, why? But I see why others may look at us like we're a part of an elitist group or society. So,
okay. What about the coffee rule? Because the coffee rule is that if you go for coffee with an advocate who's more senior, they're the ones who get the bill, right? Yeah. Do you subscribe to that as well?
The first time it ever happened to me, I was in shock. Okay, I was so surprised because we were in a restaurant. I was at a bunch of, so I worked at a top tier law firm in Nairobi, if I may say so myself, at Anjawala in Kana. And we were out for dinner with our colleagues, and then at the same restaurant, we had one of our seniors who was also having a meal there, right? And we didn't obviously go up to them because like they're our seniors and they're having their own due.
Right.
So at the end of the night, when we were now asking for the bill, we realized that our bill had already been paid for by the senior. And that was the first time, honestly, ever that I had that like experience. And I was so confused. I was like, why? What did I do? Like, what do I owe? But it was explained to me that it's just, it's an honor to be recognized by your senior and to be given like the opportunity to enjoy yourself, So if they're your senior, and I'm now expected to subscribe to the same. So when I'm in the room and I'm the senior, I'm expected to foot someone else's bill, which honestly in this economy is not like sustainable, but we move. So yeah, it's kind of like a cultural thing that's been passed down in the advocate circle, and not many people are as aware about it because I don't feel as many people put it into practice anymore. But at the firm that I worked in, they were so key on like putting it into our minds that our seniors are to be respected, and they also afford us the same level of respect. So that was cool.
I don't know. I don't think I practiced law long enough to like really experience that. But I guess good for you. Yeah,
lots of free meals coming our way.
So tell me, what was your background like? Where did you grow up? What kind of family did you grow up in? And what was the money situation?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Mombasa. I'm born and bred in Mombasa. I went to high school there. I grew up, I'm a product of an intercultural marriage. So what that means is my dad comes from a Muslim family and my mom comes from a Hindu family. And they got married and they had a baby, which is, me. And my mom is a Christian. So before my mom is a Christian. She's a believer. She loves Jesus.
Sorry, you said Muslim and Hindu.
Correct. Background.
Oh, background. Okay.
Yeah. So my mom comes from a Hindu family. She's the firstborn. Okay. And my dad comes from a Muslim family. He's the secondborn. And before my mom got married to my dad, she had a revelatory experience in life, and she accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior.
Okay.
And then she married my dad, and she was completely ostracized, and like they eloped. It was like dramatic. Okay. So you can understand why I turned out the way I have, right? Cool. So they got married, they had a baby, that's me. And I was born now into that environment. So I got exposure to going to the mosque, I've gone to the temple, I've gone to church, I've gone to a Buddhist monastery, like I've gone to every possible place of worship you can think of.
Okay.
And generally, my parents encouraged us to do that, us meaning my brother and I, so that we could make a decision for ourselves as to what kind of belief system we want to subscribe to. So yeah, that's
Okay.
like my
Let
cultural
me ask
background.
you, wait, actually, before I ask you a couple of questions on that, so what was the money situation like?
Oh, money.
Yeah.
Well, we come from a very middle class family. My
Okay.
dad was the sole income earner. My
Okay.
mom was a housewife. And yeah, so the reason we got to go to an international school is because his company sponsored us based off of my preschool, grades. And they were like, okay, we'll sponsor this child. So we thank God for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, my dad has worked really hard to like make us a middle class family.
What was his profession?
He was the branch manager for a timber company in Mombasa.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So back to my questions now. So those are 4 different, I guess, religions that you've explored.
Yeah.
First, I'll start with, so with your mom being Christian and your dad being Muslim, was there any tension? I always imagine, I grew up in a Christian family for all intents and purposes. Both my parents are Christian, but I would always wonder if one of them was Muslim, like what would that be like? Was there tension, like when you have the meal set out on the table and people are like, okay, let's pray? Is there now tension about what's going to happen?
Well, there was a little bit, I won't lie.
Yeah.
So, like I said, when my mom got married, she was ostracized from her family. So her parents did not speak to her for many years. And it already caused like tension as it is when that happened. And then when I was born, now my dad's parents, my grandparents had their influence, obviously, because we're an Indian family, right? And they were like, they would want us to go to the mosque, they would want us to go for the classes, they would want us to get as much written education about religion as we could so that we can now make our own choice. I have to give it to my dad though. Like my dad is a very laid back, chilled out human being. And he was just like, don't follow anything blindly, but make your own choices. And to be fair, in our house, generally, like we respected one another's choices. So if my mom wanted to say grace at the table, she was welcome to do so. But if no one else wanted to say grace with her, we were also welcome to do so.
So what does that mean? Like you just watch her? Like you guys just sit and watch her as she prays?
That's happened a few times. Yeah, we would just watch her and say amen at the end. And yeah, or we would go to the mosque and I would be in the mosque counting light bulbs because like I'm least interested in what was happening at that particular point in time. And nobody judged me for it. It was just like, okay, she's here, she's paying attention kind of, and she knows what's happening. So in the future, she'll decide for herself what she wants to do. So it was really chilled out, but the tension was from the outside. So like other people having opinions about how we should subscribe and what we should do. So yeah.
Okay. What was it like, I guess, visiting the Buddhist and Hindu elements?
Well, the Hindu elements always confuse me a little bit, I won't lie, because I am a very rational thinker. So there were some aspects of the Hindu faith when I was growing up that were not explained to me very well. So I never felt comfortable enough to have a conversation around it. So I would avoid it. So like, it wasn't my favorite. But going to church was great because it was all in English. I understood like the language and what was happening, and people took time to explain to me, and that was like the turning point for my religious journey in life. Yeah. So
what did you end up as?
I love Jesus. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a Jesus Christian believer. I married a Christian, and we're very, very grateful that we have Jesus in our lives. So yeah.
If I ask you based off the comment you've just made, because you said, the Christian faith, I guess it really broke it down to you, and it's sort of in a way that you could understand. So if the other religions had done the same and had given a better synthesis of their doctrine, do you think you'd have had a more difficult time choosing?
I didn't actually make my choice until I was about 21 years old.
Okay. That's like...
It took a while.
Yeah.
I read a lot. Like, I tried to figure it out because on both sides, like, my parents were never pressurizing us to follow anything by force. But I felt that it was my responsibility to choose something that's going to make sense and that I can be able to justify. So the legal mind was there from the very beginning, you know? So it wasn't until I had experiences in life that now made me question who God is, what God is, and why I want to follow a God, that I had to now consciously decide which religion I was going to give my time and energy to. So it took a while, but when I got there, I was more confident in my choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question on this. Is there or what is it about the other religions that made you not pick them?
Fellowship. Fellowship has to be the word for it, because in Christ, and I don't mean to make this like
No, it's
you
just
know,
fascinating for me.
okay,
And
good.
so I'm asking, yeah.
So I'll answer. In Jesus, I found fellowship. I found a friend, for real. Like, it's not just the hymn and the song that says it, but I was able to find a spirit that conversed with me. Whereas with the other religious avenues that I had explored, I never found that kind of connection. So the Christian faith especially spoke to me because it was rational. I could rationalize what was being said to me. I could look for the information and justify what was being said to me. And then I had a personal relationship with the God that I was informed about. So it wasn't just someone telling me about him, but now I knew him. So it was between me and him to figure out where I was going to go with this relationship, and not about my mom or my dad or anybody else having an influence. So it was enlightening.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. There needs to be like another whole podcast episode on all of that. But okay, so you said you grew up in a middle class family. You talked about, I guess, your dad's company sponsoring your education to be able to go to a international school. So when do you first begin to interact with money? Whether it's pocket money, whether it's errand money, buying groceries for the house and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, 10 out of 10 to my mom and dad, because we started having conversations around budget from a very young age. So at the point at which I was turning 12 years old, my parents decided, okay, now it's a good time to start teaching her how to have money. Yeah. So it wasn't just about my dad giving me 100 shillings to go to the shop, but now it was, this is 500 shillings for the whole month. How are you going to spend it? If you want to go for a movie, if you want to take yourself to the cyber and spend some time on the internet because we didn't have a computer at home. If you want to buy yourself coupons for school snacks or whatever, all of this has to come out of your designated 500 shillings a month. My parents didn't just start that with me and leave out my brother. So he's 3.5 years younger than me, but he had the same experience. So for him, when he was like 9, my parents introduced him to the concept of an allowance and what that means.
Yeah.
At the same time, my dad never shied away from giving us our hand-to-mouth situation. Like, this is how much money comes in. This is what all our expenses are. This is how much is allocated for you and enjoyment. And this is what we're left with at the end of the month. And that kind of openness has trained me to think about money as a resource. Like, it's a means to an end and not the end, So it can be used in a way that brings me the happiness that I need, but it's not my source of happiness at the same time. So that kind of like open communication from the age of 12, literally pre-teenage, has influenced how I approach money and how I approach budgets from the beginning.
So if I've understood you correctly, you're saying you knew exactly how much money your dad was making.
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened?
12.
You were 12.
Yeah.
That's I have 2 questions on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, looking back now, and I'm asking this from a perspective of I have a daughter who's turning 11 this year, and I'm wondering if I tell her how much money I'm making, right? And she's like, this is the whole situation. Does that put undue pressure on her that she can't process as an 11-year-old? So I'm wondering for you, looking back now or even then, did you ever feel like, oh my goodness, we don't have enough money to do the stuff that we want to do? And did that then cause, undue duress for you as a 12-year-old?
In some ways, yes. It made me hyper aware of like what you're describing. There was a lot of pressure in the sense that now I know exactly what is happening. So if we go to the supermarket and we overspend the allocated amount, in my mind, I'm like, oh no, we're going to be 2,000 shillings short at the end of the month, That was definitely a constant thought.
Yeah.
But again, I have to say, what that taught me was self-control with money. So even though my parents there was never a point where we didn't have a meal on the table or a roof over our heads or fuel in our car. Like all of our basic needs were met and provided for. And it showed me from that point in life generally that you can make do with what you have, and if you don't have, then you just genuinely don't have, and you won't go to pick up that thing or to spend on that particular item or whatever it is. So put the pressure on me to know and be hyper aware. Like when I started uni and I knew my dad's company was no longer sponsoring my education.
Okay.
I knew how much my dad had to spend on my education. I knew how much leeway I would have in terms of what my monthly allowance would be, how much I spend out of that allowance, whether or not I need to start looking for a side hustle, whether or not I need to look for other ways to now incentivize myself to make money so that I'm taking off pressure from my folks from a very early point in my legal career. You know, so from the age of 16, I've been working. Like whatever, holidays, vacations, whatever time I get, I will put myself out there, make a small buck so that I can bring home something and save it for myself and know that I have money to spend in the future. So that general training that came from a very early age shaped how I approach money all through my life now. And yes, it was a lot for me to take in at 12, but the way my parents broke it down for us was not to put pressure on us, but to keep us informed so that we don't feel like they're not giving us what other kids in our age group had access to because we went to a particular school or because we went to a particular club or because we went to a particular restaurant. So that kind of awareness really shaped my relationship with them and my relationship with money, which I appreciate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I think by the time I was being exposed to that from a family perspective, I was probably college level. I was 18, 19 by the time I had, I guess, the same conversation you seem to be having at 12. And so I guess from my perspective, I was just wondering, okay, so you then finish. What international school was this that you were in actually?
Oshwell Academy.
Oshwell Academy.
Yeah, in Mombasa.
Okay, Mombasa, okay. So finish Oshwell Academy. And do you know how much the fees was there?
When I graduated from Oshwell Academy, my last fee that my dad paid in A-levels was 130,000 shillings.
Per term.
Per term.
You know, this is funny because as I was driving here this morning, I was looking at IGCSE fees for different schools, and right now I think Braeburn was like, I think from year 9 upwards was like 1.2, 1.3 million a year.
Oh my gosh, that is wild.
St. Christopher's is 1.2 million a year. What else did I see? Anyway, I was looking at a couple, and Aga Khan Academy as well was like 1.2. That's from year 9 a year. So essentially, you're talking about 300,000, 400,000 a term thereabout.
That's what my dad paid for the year at that point.
So anyway, so I look at some of the schools now, and I'm just like, it's going to be something.
It's challenging.
Yeah, it's going to be something. But yeah, okay. So so you finish, and then you know that the company's not going to pay for your university. So does that in any way affect what you're thinking in terms of where you want to go?
Okay. So when I finished high school, I was given the opportunity to apply to 5 different UK universities. UK universities specifically because our school offered that program through UCAS. So I applied. I got accepted to all of them, and I got offered a partial scholarship at the University of Kent, I think. Either Kent or Southampton. It was a while back, but I can't. One of them. And that was just not within our means. My family could not afford to send me to the UK. We couldn't afford to house me in the UK. It doesn't matter that I got a partial scholarship on my tuition fees, but it was not an option.
Yeah.
So my parents sat me down. Obviously we had a long discussion about it. And, when we talked about it, they explained to me that this, and I understood this from the beginning. Even when I was applying, I knew that this was not going to be something that was within my reach, but it didn't hurt to just know. So I applied anyway. However, that same month, whereas all of this was going on, we saw an ad in the newspaper for Strathmore University Law School. And my mom, was like, Jesus has told me this is where you're going to go. And I said, okay, ma'am. Let's go. Yeah. So we came to Nairobi. We did the entrance interview. I did the IQ test, and
they give you an IQ test to get into Strathmore.
Oh yeah, you can't enter the law school without having a certain minimum IQ.
Really?
Yeah. I was even shocked, but that's what I had to go through.
So what's your IQ?
I think it was in the 120 something range. Okay. Yeah. I can't remember at the time. Well, I have it somewhere, but I can check. But yeah, so we did the test, we did the interview, and a couple of weeks later, they got back to me and they invited me to come and start with them. I hadn't even gotten my final results yet, but they were open to letting me start immediately. Otherwise, I'd have had to wait another year. So when we looked at the fee structure, the university was gracious enough to come up with the payment plan, and that was something that my dad could afford, and he financed my entire university degree.
Okay.
So yeah.
How much is a sophomore? Is it $1 million a year or something?
No, for the 4-year degree that
Yeah.
I did at the time, because we were one of the entry cohorts, it
Yeah.
was 1.5 million shillings
For the 4 years.
for the 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so we paid 183,500 per semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's your law school, and because of I'm asking because of the context and the way it's been set up for you, where you applied for these UK universities, couldn't afford it, have a conversation, go to Strathmore, and at Strathmore it's like, okay, yeah, this is the fee, that's gonna get on a payment plan to be able to make it happen. Do you have any pressure to perform, to make it work, purely from a financial perspective, not just from I want to do well in school?
Okay, yeah. So, yes, initially there was a lot of pressure, but I'm going to let you in on something now.
Yeah.
So, when I finished high school, I was not in the best mental space. Like, I got my I got the grades. I always had the grades, but mentally I was not doing so well.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm about to explain.
Okay.
So I was sexually assaulted at a very young age. I was 17, and when I got out of high school, it was a very traumatic experience for me at that particular point in time, and it required me to reevaluate why I was making all the choices that I was making. So it was also really difficult for my parents to let me go from Mombasa to Nairobi, but it required a lot of faith, a lot of prayer, and we made it. So when I moved to Nairobi, I wasn't staying by myself. I was staying as a paying guest. So my dad catered for that cost to make sure that I had a home and people who are going to, observe me and my behavior. A couple of months into my education, it wasn't so much pressure academically, but again, just mentally, I wasn't doing so well. So I was recommended to go to the counselor's office and get some therapy. Okay. So we went through initial 3 years of this process. And the whole time, obviously, I'm thinking my dad is paying out of his pocket. I need to perform. I need to make sure I get the grades and all of that. And all of that was okay. But coming to my 3rd year, I was completely burnt out. And I had to sit down with my dad and be like, I don't think I can finish this degree. And, Mr. Munir, God bless him, was like, no, you're going to finish the degree with a lot of love and kindness. Yeah. So my dad and I agreed that I would take a year off from school. So I took a gap year. In my 3rd year. So literally just before entering 4th year, my final year, I took a gap year and I decided to work, which is where I started earning 17,747 shillings a month. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to finish this law degree and if I'm going to commit to this lifestyle, I need to know what I'm getting myself into, which is why I started working at 21. And I was like, now I'm going to get into formal employment. I just want to have an idea what I'm signing up for. I'm putting all this time and energy into this. Is it worthwhile? Is it going to give me the resources that I need to make the moves that I want to in life?
Yeah.
Especially considering all the sacrifices that my parents have been making to get me to this point.
Yeah.
So my dad said, okay, if that's what you want, but you're not coming back home without a job. And I was like, done. So I was here walking the streets of Upper Hill, with my my CVs in hand and a brown folder, dropping them off at every possible place I could think of, just trying to get a job. So when I did get a job, I was determined to make that purposeful, to learn something from it and to know why I'm getting into this legal career. And I worked here in Nairobi. I didn't go back home. I stayed the whole year. For 6 months. For 9 months, I worked in Nairobi, and then I went back to Mombasa and I worked for another 6 months until I was ready to go back to uni and finish my 4th year. Yeah. So it was not easy, and I'm sure my parents wanted to pull their hair out along the way because they were like, we've invested so much in this girl. But eventually, I found my way back, and I graduated with a second upper, with second class honors. Right. So I did okay academically, but it was just a journey mentally to get to the point where I'm okay with spending their money, but also knowing that it's going to be worthwhile for me to be here and doing this. Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, terribly sorry
It's okay.
about the experience that you had and whatever it is that happened. I mean, that's never, yeah.
It's not a pleasant
No,
experience,
no, yeah.
but it's also not something that I shy away from now, because it gives the context that someone would need to understand where I come from in life, or like
Yeah.
why I've made the choices that I have made, you know? So it's important to know that it wasn't like roses and rainbows as I was coasting and getting through school and
Yeah.
stuff, but there was a genuine struggle in mentally and physically getting through that process
Yeah.
and making it to the end where I'm saying, okay, I was admitted to the bar on the 7th of May, you know,
Right.
because it was a
Okay.
journey.
If I can ask, if you'd allow me to ask,
Sure.
a question on. So when you're saying that you got to the point where you're burnt out, where you're like, yeah, my folks are spending so much money, I need to be able to XXX. Like, what are the thoughts or feelings that you're having that are the things that I guess maybe you were unable to process that led you to that point where you had to take a break?
Well, Strathmore University has a very intensive and very inclusive, like it's intensive because it requires your brain power, but it's also like inclusive because you physically need to like include yourself in group work, in classes, in discussions, in, you know, reading. Like it's a lot
Yeah.
for anyone to be dealing with at any point in time. And law school generally is stressful.
Yeah.
And then when you pair that with like mental health issues coming from being 17, 18 and like just processing everything that's happening to my body and my mind, I was not able to communicate that in the words that I'm using today to the
Yeah.
people that I was with at that time. So it brought me to a very like weird place because I was like, I'm feeling all these things. I'm spending all this money. I don't really know what my end goal is. You know, I started with a particular purpose in mind, but then life has changed since then. It's been a couple of years. So what am I doing? And it kind of goes back to the God conversation, because now that's when Jesus was like, come to me, child. Like,
Right.
bring, you know, cast your fears and anxieties upon me and I will give you strength.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got to the end of that process that I was able to say, yeah, let me now go back and talk to my parents and say, I'm ready to go back to school and finish this degree. And I will bring it to you and you can frame it because, you know, it's your hard work.
Right.
But I did the effort, but, you know, now I'm ready to do that. But
Yeah.
previously I was in a lot of denial and I was struggling to like balance the academic aspect of life with the growth aspect of life. So yeah, it was a struggle.
Okay. Well, I guess, you know, get to the end, graduate really well, get to Kenya School of Law.
Yes.
I think you're the third lawyer I've had on here.
Oh.
And the other two who've come up, I've asked them this question about the Kenya School of Law. What are your thoughts on the Kenya School of Law?
Where?
Did you pass at one go?
I got 9 Ps one time.
Oh,
I
you're
did.
what, like, is it a 6%?
Correct. In fact, in our year,
Yeah.
we were the 3%.
3%,
Because
right.
our year was the just pre-COVID year and
Yeah.
like there was a lot of people struggling.
Yeah.
But I did pass all the 9 papers the first time round, and I thank God for that because it was a challenge. Like getting there was a challenge.
Yeah.
I had a lot of issues even getting into Kenya School of Law because they wanted me to go and convert my IGCSE grades to KCSE.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had to go through that whole process, which nobody tells you about in advance
Yeah.
because it'll just hit you and you're like, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to go through that. Kenya School of Law itself was a learning experience. Like it taught me character development. It made me a better Kenyan, and it has showed me flames because I have learnt resilience in that place. Like you must persevere and you must be resilient. Because if you lack perseverance, you will not make it to the end. And if you are not resilient, you will fall along the way and you will hurt yourself. So whether it's learning how to pop a squat or like balancing on those chairs which weren't quite working properly, you know, I may have a back problem because of that.
Yeah.
But like 9 months, we had to get through it just so that I can finish that
Yeah.
process and
Yeah.
successfully say that I have been admitted to the bar.
Yeah.
But it was not easy.
Yeah.
And they don't make it easy.
No,
you
they
know,
don't.
like
No, they
it's
don't, yeah.
difficult getting into it, getting out of it. Even doing those 9 papers at one time, it's a struggle.
Not simple, yeah.
I'm so like my best friend and I did it together, and we were so determined that we were never going to step foot in that place again that we gave it our all. Like 99.9% of me was given to that 1 year.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have no regrets because it taught me so much about myself. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So you leave KSL, you get into the, I guess, quote unquote, proper job market now,
Yeah.
right? Do you work as is that when you get to Anjawala and in Cannes?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I started at Anjawala in Kana in August of 2019. I was with them for 20 months throughout the training program. So
Right.
they have an advocates training program that they carry out at the firm. And I was one of the young lawyers that was privileged enough to be selected
there,
for
yeah.
that program. I say it's a privilege because I had to go through like a 5-tier interview process. It
Yeah.
wasn't a joke.
To get to the end.
Yeah, and that's when I started at A&K. I started before I finished my final exams at the Kenya School of Law. So I was there in my third term. I worked through the third term and I studied through the third term. They gave us 2 weeks off to go and sit our exams and then come right back and get into the sauce of things. And yeah, so that's when COVID happened, the following year. So 2020 March is when COVID hit. And that was about my 6-month mark in my training. So yeah, I got exposure to so many different departments. I worked in litigation, I did project management, I did real estate, I did corporate. So I got a good range of exposure. And at the same time, I was also able to start developing daily event, which is kind of like how that was born.
Yeah.
So yeah, working at a corporate law firm, there is restrictions on how much you can say and what you can do generally because of the image of the firm, and you have to maintain that, of course, 100%. No like arguments there. But as someone who has always had a drive towards activism, it was not necessarily the best environment for me.
Right.
So when I finished my training, I was very gracious and very grateful to them for the opportunity, but I also just had to say, peace, I'm out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. What was the compensation like through this advocates training program?
Well, we were the most highly compensated advocates in the market at the time.
Okay.
They did offer a competitive package. I don't think I'm at liberty to say the amount, but they did offer a competitive package. They also offered multiple benefits in the program. So I have to say that A&K fairly remunerated us. Of course we were trainees and of course we worked long hours, but given the amount of exposure and learning that I got out of it, 100% worth it. So it was competitive. They are, I think, one of the best paymasters in the market, especially in the top tier law firm market. And I think it was fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you then leave A&K, go do your thing independently. How much, at that point in time, do you have any considerations of how you're going to make your money? Because at that rate, 2 years into working into a law degree, I don't know that you've really built a client base or anything like that.
No.
So what's the thought process financially around the decision you're making at that point?
So let me break it down for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I started studying law, like in the very beginning, I was about 14 years old when I made the initial decision that I wanted to go to law school. Yeah, was because I watched Legally Blonde, okay, the Reese Witherspoon movie, and there's a quote in that movie by Aristotle, and I've remembered it all my life. It says, "The law is reason free from passion." Okay, that's what it says, and it's self-explanatory in my opinion. It takes a lifetime to understand it, but I think it is self-explanatory. So when I was getting to the end of my training program at Anjawala and Kana, I was definitely in a headspace where I was not sure I wanted to continue to stay employed. Okay. I'm like, I'm about to get admitted to the bar. I'm going to get my practicing certificate, which means technically I can be self-employed because that's my license to practice, right? That's what I've been working towards for 8 years at that point. And I was just like, I don't see myself continuing to work these long hours, making someone else's paycheck. Like, it just wasn't motivating me.
Yeah.
So I took everything that I had and I sold it. Okay. So like my house that was in Nairobi, my furniture, whatever it was, I sold everything. And I took whatever money I got from there and I relocated back to Mombasa. So I packed up my house in Nairobi. I said bye-bye to A&K. I got my practicing certificate because I got admitted. And then I moved back home. I asked my dad, this was an actual conversation that we had, and I was like, can I come and stay on your couch? Like, can I come and live in your house for a couple of weeks until I figure out what it is that I'm going to do with my life? And then, we could come up with some sort of a rent scheme over here because I don't want to be living here. Like, I don't want to stay for free, just out of respect. So my dad obviously was so happy to have me home. I'm his only daughter, so he was just like, come child. And that made me, give me some security. So I think when I packed up from here, I was left with about 39,000 shillings, which after like selling stuff, paying for stuff, getting the deposit done, and just generally after everything, I was left with about 39K. That's after catering for my flight to go to Mombasa. So I go back to Mombasa, I stay on my parents' couch for like 2 weeks, and then I have a thought. And I'm like, a couple of weeks ago, before I left A&K, I met an auditor who was looking to partner with an advocate so that we could be able to revive a practice that his father had running in Mombasa. And he has a whole range of audit clients that require legal services. So my brain was like, Rukhsar, that's the perfect opportunity for you to go and make something out of it, right? So I looked for this man, God bless him. I looked for him and I went to his office and I had a little portfolio pitch lined up, and I was like, I know we had a brief conversation a couple of weeks back and I said I would get back to you, but I didn't, but I'm here now. And if you're open to it, I would like to register my own law firm and take on the business that you have, and we can come up with an arrangement and have like a not formal, but formal partnership. Yeah. So he was like in it 100%. He was like so down, he was just like, you're young, you're vibrant, you're energetic. You can come and set up at our offices. We'll give you some space. We can work out on a rental scheme, like, program, share office costs. And basically I got myself like a sharing office situation. So that's how we started, with my 39,000 shillings as like a deposit, for using the space, for getting an assistant on board, just so that I have someone to like do some administrative work for me, and him offering to cater for half the cost until I am on my feet. Which, to be fair, took us about 6 to 9 months, like generally until I had enough to cater for those costs and I was no longer dependent on someone supplementing the bills. So that's how we started. So I used part of that money to register the business, to like get the business name, to get the clearance letter from the LSK, to apply for my practicing certificate for that year, and to like get the clearance that I needed for that. Just like the formalities, name search, nini, all those things put together, kind of just took my money one time. And then we started from zero. And we worked our way to 4 years into practice now. So it's good stuff.
Within those 6 to 9 months, so you're staying at home in those 9 months. And what's the journey like to be able to actually, as a practicing advocate, what's the journey like to actually be able to make enough revenue to meet your costs and take money home?
Well, you see, something that you realize very early on when you start as an individual practicing is that you are not taught how to run a law firm. You are often taught how to be a really good employee. So you know how to follow instructions, but you don't necessarily know how to give instructions. You don't know how to take instructions from a client. So it was and because I was so fresh, so green coming out of my admission, it took time for me to be able to understand what my clients' expectations would be, what the general process is for the services that I'm offering to my clients are, so that if a client asks me something along the way, I'm not looking for their file, but now I know where they are in the process. Understanding how to calculate fees and how to value your time. Because when you work at a law firm, if you're working at a top tier law firm, you're most likely going to be filling out timesheets. And you're accounting for your time every 5-minute block, right? But as an individual who is in business and is an entrepreneur and is running their own practice, you need to have time for business development so that you could be out on the field, actually meeting people, taking client meetings, taking people out. Like, you have to spend some money to make some money. And then in addition to that, you now have to find time to do the work. So not only are you spending your 8 to 5 outside trying to get work, you're spending 5 to 11 doing the work. So I went from complaining about being at work 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. to now working from like 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. because I have to build something for myself. So it was not easy. Put in a lot of hours, but slowly you start to see the benefits. So you start to see like, oh, look, 1 month now I'm breaking even. That means I've catered for all of my costs, and I have a little bit to take home as a salary for myself. The next month, I have a salary for myself. I can now afford to employ a clerk, someone on a part-time basis who I'm paying, let's say, 5Gs a month.
Yeah.
And I have now a printer that I was able to buy, you know? So just like making those small decisions and then saving along the way makes a huge difference in how you're going to reinvest into your business, and then be aware of like the accounting aspect, because there's so much accounting that goes into day-to-day management of a business that you will not necessarily see when you're working for someone else, because you only see the fee note that goes out to the client. Do you see when you got paid? Do you see whether they paid the full amount? Do you see when they paid the full amount? If they gave you a post-dated check, if you had to go and spend some more money out of your client account, did you get a reimbursement? Like, just all these questions around management that I had never had to think about and now are being asked to me were a shock. Like, okay, not a shock, but like it required my thinking to shift from I am taking instructions to now I am giving instructions, and just understanding that I needed to level up in my attitude towards my business, because it wasn't just now a means to an end, but it's now a source of livelihood for other people, especially if I want to employ them. So I have to make sure that I'm not only making enough for my home, but I'm now making enough to sustain their home. So it really was a transitionary process.
I have two questions for you. First one is, because I guess before we started recording, we're talking about the fact that you said you run 3 households. So at what point do you begin, in the last 4 years, do you begin managing 3 households? And then 2, my second question has gone.
I can answer the first one.
Yeah, I can answer the first one, yeah.
So I moved home in June 2021. So when I started the business, my dad still had a job. And he was still able to support. He wasn't getting his full salary at the time because the company was not doing well. But he was able to support a section of the household expenses. So I didn't have to like contribute until a little bit later. So until my business was actually on its own feet. Getting into 2022, my dad's position was made redundant, and the company stopped paying their salaries. So from around mid 2022 to present, I am managing and running the cost of my maternal household, like my parents' house. Then earlier this year when I got married, my husband and I moved into our own place in Mombasa, but he had to move to Nairobi because he got a job here. So when he moved, now we're running our house in Mombasa plus where he's staying in Nairobi. So technically I was splitting my income into 3 different households. A question on I guess supporting your folks and your parents. Because I guess fortunately I've had the privilege of not having to take care of my parents' household or contribute or have to do anything, to be honest, which is nice. A privilege. Yeah, which is a privilege I can only attest to. But my question is, so when you're supporting your parents, right? These are the people who have invested in you to be who you are, right? So is there the feeling of just, I'm just going to give them all my money? Wow, it's a real struggle.
Yeah.
It's an actual
How do you
struggle.
Decide? Yeah.
So, you guys, first of all, my husband and I, before we got married, we went for premarital counseling, okay? And this was an actual conversation and an actual concern of his, because he was like, she gives them all her money. Okay, it wasn't like, he wasn't saying it in a bad way, but he was just like, I need to learn how to like balance those priorities. But again, it just comes back around to like my parents and I having honest conversations with one another, and me telling them that, look, this is how much I bring in, at the end of the month. This is how much I'm able to afford to allocate to you. And this is how much I need to keep my business running and keep my houses running. So it wasn't an easy conversation. It's not been easy at all.
Was it the same conversation you had when you were 12 years old?
But the other way around?
Reversed?
Correct.
Yeah.
The irony of it did not pass us by. We all had a great laugh about it because really the roles were reversed, and you could see like the influence that they've had on my life, like me now reflecting right back at them. So it was definitely the same conversation, but the other way around. And my parents were so gracious, probably a bit more gracious than I was at the age of 12, just because, context. But they were very understanding, and like they really genuinely do their best to live within their means, which is something that they've taught us how to do. And they make it easy for me to help them to live within our means.
Yeah.
So I don't struggle with it, but
Yeah.
I just take it as a blessing. Cause,
I mean,
yeah.
but before you got married, what percentage of your income were
Everything.
you giving? You were giving them everything.
Everything. Like other than what I use for my personal expenditure and my...
So like you do your rent, your
Yeah. After
Yeah.
I've taken out my personal expenses, my savings and my business cost, I would give them everything. That's literally like how it even works right now, to be fair. Yeah. But the other things now have priority, you know. So
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so and now you've just moved to Nairobi,
Yes.
right? How much of that, because again, because the conversation we had beforehand, talking about 3 different households, how much of that was a financially inspired decision?
All of it. Okay.
Yeah.
No, let me give my husband some grace.
Yeah.
50% of it was financially motivated, simply because it was becoming increasingly difficult for us to run 2 households between ourselves.
Yeah.
So paying for 2 Wi-Fis, paying for 2 electricity, paying for 2 waters, just not making sense.
Yeah.
So we decided that economically, we're going to close up 1 house in Mombasa, because I'll have my parents' house that I can stay at whenever I'm at the coast, and move our home to Nairobi, so that we're paying now 1 household cost on this
Yeah.
side, and I have 1 household cost that I'm catering for on that side.
Yeah.
Culturally, these are discussions that you would be having with the boy child. Okay, but the boy child is younger in my case, so I'm the firstborn, and I have to take on these responsibilities.
Right.
And that's why my parents and I are constantly like having these discussions, even with my husband. So it's been an adjustment for all of us. But the move to Nairobi was 100% like economically and financially motivated, to the extent that it's not sustainable for us to continue like this.
But why not he come to Mombasa? Why you come here?
He was actually based in Mombasa until he got his Nairobi job. So because Nairobi offered him greener pastures and he genuinely likes what he's doing here more, it made more sense for us to move here. And because I am a social entrepreneur, I can technically work from anywhere. So I have my base in Mombasa, which I'll be going back and forth between. But between the 2 of us, it makes more sense for me to be mobile than for him. So, yeah.
Okay. If I was to ask you a little bit of a detailed question on that, and I don't want, maybe not figures, but percentage.
Sure.
If you did the math on it, right, how much money are you guys saving now? What percentage, like, how much more money are you saving now against you running 2 households? Because if you're saying, yeah, you go back and forth with Mombasa, because for example, it's like, if you let's say you worked in Westlands, right, and you have a house in, I don't know, Thika, right? So then getting a house closer to Westlands would be a lot more expensive. But then if you factor in the amount of fuel you'd spend on a daily basis from Thika to here, you'd be like, maybe it actually does add up, and so it makes sense to get a house in Westlands. So I'm curious about how much money you then actually end up saving by moving here, and whether it was actually, because there's a feel, there's a feel. I feel like there's a feeling of it, or you feel like you'll save, but then if you do the math of it, you'd feel that actually maybe you don't. So I'm curious. Yeah.
So I can give you figures.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. Okay.
Sure. Please,
I won't
give us
disclose
figures.
salaries, but
Yeah.
I can give you. I can give us some management figures, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So in Mombasa, rent was 60K.
Yeah.
In Nairobi, rent is 65.
Okay.
Okay. No, let's go back a little bit. In
Yeah.
Mombasa, rent was 60K for the apartment that we were living in, 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
In Nairobi, for a studio apartment furnished, partly serviced, that he was living in, 45.
Okay.
Okay, so 60 plus 45, 105,000
Yeah.
shillings. That's rent.
Yeah.
Between the 2 of us for our 1 household.
Right.
Okay. That's not taking into account what I'm spending for my parents' household. So
Yeah.
let's not think about that. Let's just think
Yeah.
about my husband and I right
Yeah.
now. Yeah. So from the 105 as rent amount, if we now move to Nairobi, where we are staying currently,
Yeah.
we're paying 65.
Okay.
So we save 40,000 shillings in terms of rent.
Right.
That 40,000 shillings can be used towards servicing our car loan. So that money is going to be repurposed towards that,
Right.
so that we're no longer taking out of our savings to pay for our car
Right.
loan.
Right.
Yeah. So repurposing of funds, number
Right.
1, in terms of rent and finance.
Right.
Then we have household expenditure.
Right.
Between the 2 houses, if I was spending, let's say, 15K in Mombasa,
Right.
and my husband is spending 12K in Nairobi,
Yeah.
that's about 27,000 shillings on groceries.
Yeah.
In Nairobi, between the 2 of us, we can spend 20K a month on groceries for the full house,
Right.
including our cat, and that will save us 7,000 shillings.
Right.
Right? That 7,000 shillings can be repurposed towards fuel for my car in Nairobi and maybe for fueling my car in Mombasa
Okay.
because I have 2 cars.
Okay.
So one necessary over there because I have to be mobile when I'm in
Right.
Mombasa, and one necessary here so that I can come and see what you wonderful people,
Right.
right? So if you repurpose that amount from 7K generally
That I
caters
can-
for my fuel.
Right.
That means I don't have to take out money from wherever I was taking out money
Yeah.
from for fuel. So we save that 7 Gs, for example. Okay. Then you think about it as electricity, 5K, 10K, because we're
10K.
both using JTL.
Right.
You cut that in half, 5K. That 5K that's left over can go towards electricity and water in Nairobi, which
Yeah.
is what we're spending. So
Yeah.
now I'm not spending 5K for electricity and water in Mombasa. Instead, I have 5K left over to go do my nails and,
Right.
fix my hair once or twice in a month.
Right.
So just in that sense, we're not spending twice as much as we would have been when we
Okay.
were running 2 households.
Okay.
In terms of a percentage of how much we are
And then
saving,
before you get the percentage, actually, if you factor in your flight to Mombasa, because if you're flying to Mombasa, how much is that?
I don't fly. I take the train. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
I don't
Okay.
mind taking the train to Mombasa twice in a month.
Right.
So
But either way, I mean, the train is a
it's
lot
cheaper.
Yeah.
But you see,
yeah.
if you fly, you'll spend 18K going and coming.
Yeah.
If I take the train, I'll go twice to Mombasa in a month and I'll still spend the same amount, 18K. Because it's 4-5 going for
Okay.
first class, 4-5 coming for first class.
Okay.
So I can afford to go twice in a month and I'll still be there on Tuesdays to Fridays at my business where I need to be at my office. And then the rest of the month I can be in Nairobi.
Okay.
So that cost for flights comes out and I can spend it on rail.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we look at it now as an overview,
Yeah.
generally between what we were spending last month and what we're spending this month, our savings have gone up by 40% because we've removed 40% of our costs from one household in Mombasa to now sharing household costs in Nairobi.
Yeah.
So yeah, we put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah. So
and
yeah, the math.
the math.
The math.
Yeah.
The math. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I guess it does. Yeah, it does add up. I was just curious because I think many times, yeah, I also sometimes make decisions and I'm like, oh, I feel this would be better. Then I do the math and I'm like, no. Then a question actually, do you find that when you have lived on your own, albeit married or in a serious relationship, you spend more money eating out than when you're with your partner? Live in the same house, like would you be more on Uber Eats or
Oh
Jumia
yeah,
or whatever the case is?
definitely.
Yeah.
Guilty of that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like when I was in
What's the highest takeout bill in a month you've had?
Probably about 10 Gs,
Yeah.
to be fair, just because of how lazy I can get when I'm by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm, at my parents' place, then there's food that's being cooked.
Right.
If I'm with my husband, then I'm definitely going to cook. Like
Right.
I'll make something so that he's, not eating noodles.
Yeah.
But like when I'm by myself, oh my gosh, there was a bad month in between now and January
Yeah.
that I can say I spent about 10 Gs on takeout. Not proud of it. Could have
Yeah.
repurposed that money, but it's gone now. So
Yeah, I know someone who spent about 45 to 50 Gs on Uber Eats in a month. The riders knew him.
oh my gosh, no, it can't be me. The Glover Prime rider did know me because I like ordering beers. So, he would bring, like, there was literally just one guy who used
Yeah.
to bring me my beers on a Sunday afternoon. So he definitely knew me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like, I try to limit my eating out budget to like maybe 2K a week,
Yeah.
just generally. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think? I mean, if I was asking right now, as you're sort of looking, further into your career and the things you want to do, what do you want to achieve financially?
So you asked me in the beginning what my favorite money story is, right?
Yeah,
And I told you that I saved up out of my pocket, in spite of all of these things that we have discussed,
Yeah.
to take myself on a fully self-funded trip to Switzerland
Yeah.
last year. And I was there for literally 30 days. I had an amazing time. I did everything that I wanted to do. And that was what was driving me at that point in life. I was like, I'm going to Switzerland and I'm going to Switzerland at my own, like on my
Yeah.
own cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, my husband and I have a wedding that we're planning for the end of this year because in January we just had our officiation.
Okay.
So we want to actually like have a nice wedding function. So we're saving for that. We're saving for our honeymoon. We are saving to finish paying off our car, which was financed. And we are hoping to relocate, God willing, in the future to a different country. But
Yeah.
we want to save up so that we're not like struggling when we do move
Yeah.
and have access to that. So generally it's savings for the future, but for what we want to do together.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. In terms of my business, obviously I want to expand to Nairobi. I want to bring the law firm outside of Mombasa. I want to put an office in Nairobi. I want to have a few more people working under me so that I can take some responsibilities off of myself. I also want to branch out. So we discussed the podcast.
Yeah.
The podcast is meant to be a lucrative venture.
Yeah.
So hopefully as we get into it, I'll be able to invest in the business and let it grow as a business and, just have a larger concept that's not just about me. And for daily events, I want to invest in better equipment. I want to just get myself larger audiences and be able to have conversations that not everybody is having.
Yeah.
So it's not really a financial goal, but it requires finances.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm looking into right now. Yeah.
Okay. My last question ties back to, I think, one of the most intriguing things I think I've ever heard or had a conversation around. Do you know what the different religions you were exposed to say about money, like each of them? Do you know what their, whether it's the doctrine or the prescriptions of the things that they say with regard to finances and money?
So I know a couple.
Okay.
I can tell you what I know.
Yeah.
So let's start with, in what my mind is from bottom up. Okay, but not it's not. It's not like a prejudice of anything, but that's how I would characterize it.
Yeah.
So if I go from here, I guess it would be the Hindu concept, which is it means it looks at money in terms of Lakshmi, which is like benefits, blessings, kind of. And if you keep your hand open and you give more, you'll get more.
Okay.
So that's the kind of philosophy that I've picked up from that side.
Okay.
Especially when you look at the work that the Sikh community does, the work that the Hindu Union does, all of these different organizations do so much for people in times of catastrophe or disaster, and that's what I've picked up on. If you look at it from the Islamic side, there's the offering that you give, zakat, something like that. I can't remember the name, but that is so that you can give back to your community, and the more you give, the better you are in God's books, according to my understanding of it.
Okay.
So if it's a scale of good and evil, the more you give, the better your scale improves on the good side.
Right.
And that's kind of what I picked up from there. When it comes down to Jesus, what is mine is his.
Yeah.
So whatever resources I have are for the glory of God. And whether it comes to tithing, or it comes to giving to my family, or it comes to giving to my community, or giving in my marriage, whatever it is, I'm called to give.
Right.
And if I hold on to something, I'm not doing anything with it. It's doing more good when it's out there in the world. And that's how I approach it. So those are my philosophies around money, but a lot of it involves giving, actually, now that I think about it. I better collect some, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess all of them in one way or another about giving, and after you give, you sort of receive. Well, anyway, interesting. Last question is I want to ask about your actually it's two. Your lowest financial point in your life, and the final question would be, if you were to sum up your money philosophy and how you operate with money and how generally you deal with money. So those last two questions. Yeah.
My lowest financial point would be sometime in the beginning of 2020, because I was having a bit of a challenge with communication with my parents at that time. And it dawned on me that if they were to remove their support in my life, I would be left with negative, because my salary was not sufficient to maintain my house even, So just becoming aware of the fact that I had nothing was very, very empowering. It also pushed me to, from that moment on, decide that there was no way I was going to continue to stay employed, because I had to be in control of that aspect of my life.
Yeah.
So I realized that I had nothing, and I was only as privileged as what the people around me were willing to offer me, at that particular point in time. So that realization really shook me and made me commit to making money for myself. That was very important.
Yeah.
And the second part of your question?
The second question was what your general money philosophy is, how you deal with money, how you live with money. Yeah.
I think my general money philosophy is to create savings accounts for everything. If you look at my NCBA Loop app, I have about 6 different savings accounts for 6 different things that I'm working towards in life. If I was to get 100,000 shillings today, you can bet before I spend any part of that 100K, I'm going to put 1,000 in every one of those little savings accounts, just so that minutely the amount will increase.
Right.
You know, and if I don't make any contribution, it will never increase.
Right.
So to be aware of the fact that, yes, I can make my ends meet, but how much of my ends meeting am I spending on recurrent expenditure versus how much of it is going to now like be an investment and give me a return on investment in the future.
Yeah.
So just categorizing and prioritizing what my money is for is very important to me.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, had another very interesting interview today, another interesting conversation. Like I said, easily. I mean, what you're telling me about the different religions that I guess that you've been exposed to, I think an interesting, you know, I don't know if it's an experience I would want to have, but I am envy of to some extent, you know, just the ability to expose yourself to like different and explore different religions and sort of try and figure for yourself, okay, this is the one that I want to go down. Also really interesting and very practical the way that you've handled money and the way that you and your husband have gone about, I guess, relocating and doing that. I think that's really cool. Hopefully a lot of people relate to that and learn from that as well. But other than that, again, thank you for coming. When your podcast is up, please let us know.
I will.
We'll come down there, listen and watch as well. But yeah, this has been Financially Incorrect, and we will see you guys on the next episode.